Advertencia. Este contenido puede ser perturbador o inquietante para algunas audiencias. ¿Cuál es el agujero de conejo más escalofriante o perturbador en Internet por el que has caído y por qué? Un tipo directo escribió sobre sus experiencias con la heroína. Básicamente quería probarla por diversión y estaba seguro de tener suficiente fuerza de voluntad para parar después. Bueno, se equivocó. Probablemente alguien recuerde el nombre del tipo o la publicación en Reddit es bastante conocida. Algo similar ocurrió en un foro noruego. Un chico preguntó cómo inyectarse y el hilo se convirtió en un diario de un año sobre cómo se volvía adicto y fallaba en dejarlo. Luego dejó de publicar y más tarde se reveló que había muerto. Se convirtió en un caso mediático por un tiempo. Entrevistaron a su mamá y todo. El principal verdugo de Arabia Saudita, Muhammad Saad al-Ashi, decapita a la gente principalmente con una espada. Vi entrevistas con él, quería saber si eso lo atormentaba. No, no lo hace. Ya está enseñando a su hijo a seguir sus pasos. Sus hijos también lo ayudan a limpiar la sangre de la espada. Luego investigué qué se considera delitos capitales y otros castigos. La lapidación es uno. Ciertos crímenes hacen que el cuerpo decapitado sea crucificado. Compré un taser en Amazon para el cumpleaños de mi hermano. Mirando las preguntas, una preguntaba si dolía. La respuesta era algo como que no, que se había tasereado en el cuello 30 veces. Muy interesado, fui a su perfil donde se ven otras reseñas y había reseñado una katana y cosas similares. Aún interesado, busqué su nombre en Facebook y encontré un perfil con una foto de él sosteniendo su katana. Lo primero que noté es que era de mi ciudad. Lo segundo, mucha gente posteaba en su Facebook diciendo que era el diablo, que no podían creer lo que hizo y que esperaban que se pudriera. Extremadamente interesado, lo busqué en Google y encontré artículos de noticias de que apuñaló a un tipo en el pecho en su apartamento con una katana. Luego huyó y fue capturado por la policía. Resulta que era muy delirante y necesitaba ayuda. Ahora está en cárcel y según el artículo parece que está recibiendo la ayuda que necesita. Fue un viaje salvaje desde solo mirar preguntas tontas sobre productos en Amazon. La escuela Elan es bastante famosa, pero para quienes no la conocen, era una escuela estadounidense que duró 40 años y era lo más cercano a un campo de concentración para niños que puedas imaginar. Toda la industria de adolescentes problemáticos es un agujero de conejo perturbador e infuriarte. Al menos la escuela Elan está cerrada, pero hay instituciones similares aún operando hoy. Padres pueden pagar para que secuestren a sus hijos y los encierren en estos lugares por casi cualquier razón, desde enfermedad mental real hasta no compartir la misma religión que sus padres. Paris Hilton fue a una en Utah en los 90. La industria de internados terapéuticos es enorme en Utah, por supuesto. He seguido la cuenta de Breaking Code Silence en Instagram. Es infuriarte cómo frecuentemente pasa esto a niños hoy. Recomiendo llamar a tus representantes y demandar que regulen estas escuelas. La industria de adolescentes problemáticos ha sido habilitada por demócratas y republicanos. Es shameful. Mi mejor amiga recientemente escapó de una. La llevaron como adolescente adicta con trauma y básicamente la abusaron hasta que cumplió con el tratamiento, que llevó a ser severamente brainwashed y aceptar un trabajo allí para ayudar a otros niños como ella y nunca dejar. La conocí hace unos años y ya estaba juntando piezas de que algo no estaba bien. Creo que en el fondo sabía que era básicamente un culto y la industria de adolescentes problemáticos envuelta en uno. Era como ver a una amiga aceptar que está en un matrimonio abusivo. Era duro sentarse y ver, pero es una reina total, y debido al litigio actual no puedo decir mucho, pero está desmantelando las escuelas de la industria en su área pieza por pieza. Es hermoso. Ojalá más gente supiera de estos lugares. No son solo scared straight en terapias de wilderness. Hay rehabs sketchy para delincuentes juveniles enviados por cortes, aunque estos programas no están tied a la corte. Reciben dinero de los niños o padres por la estadía. File their insurance y también enroll them in Medicaid por dinero adicional, etc. Están closely tied a gobiernos locales y estatales, y nuestros dólares de impuestos básicamente subsidian el abuso de niños. Es sick. Blogs de gente obsesionada con perder extremidades o reemplazarlas con ganchos, etc. Algunos siguieron con accidentes donde machacaron sus manos beyond repair para lograr su goal. Me recuerda a ese tipo de Sudáfrica que tenía un blog hace años. Su cosa eran amputaciones, y Badly quería amputar su pie perfectamente saludable por whatever reason. Sentía que no pertenecía a su cuerpo. Infligía injurias a su pie cortándolo con un cuchillo, luego lo ponía en un balde full de su propia mierda para causar infección. Todo documentado con fotos diarias. Literally podías ver la progresión diaria de su pie pudriéndose y volviéndose negro hasta que un día dejó de postear. Volvió semanas después y escribió que casi muere, había passed out por un bad caso de sepsis y su landlord lo encontró en el baño. Crazy stuff. Y sí volvió del hospital con su pie amputado. Uno de los más weird para mí fue leer sobre la violencia en Yugoslavia durante la Segunda Guerra Mundial, especialmente sobre los ustacha croatas y el campo de concentración Jasenovac. Toda el área estaba beset por guerra civil con shocking violence de múltiples parties, pero las anécdotas sobre los ustacha stand out. Un high-ranking member del partido nazi visitó Croacia donde los nazis ayudaron a establish un estado puppet. Witnessing the extent de la violence himself, dijo, esto es suficiente para hacer vomitar a un hombre. Jasenovac es algo que no mortal podría bear to witness. Hay un doc llamado The Bridge, que capturó 23 de los 24 suicidios del Golden Gate Bridge en SF en 2004. Apparently the bridge is wildly popular suicide site. Por 2004 había más de 1200 suicidios con un 98% death rate. Anyway, es really dark, y me envió a una pequeña expedición de research sobre los suicidios. Apparently el 2% que sobrevivió say they instantly regretted jumping more, and that starts to make you think about suicides and how much pain people are in to take that step, yet there is a shock of clarity once they've done the irreversible. Just reading about that desperation and sadness triggered so much in me. Really can't go down those rabbit holes anymore. Abrí un site una vez que tenía pictures de celebs taken after they died. The most prominent one I remember being that of Chris Farley. And that's something I'll never forget. Mi hermano se mató con un amigo last Halloween while hiking Mount Rainier. Their bodies were discovered by some hikers who proceeded to upload pics to their bodies to a gay death fetish site. I guess some info got out, but now every week I get people contacting me about his body, asking me if I have more pics, or blaming my family for his death through whatever social media they can find. Mostly his memorial page. It can be extremely mean. It doesn't bother most of my family much. We know how to deal with trolls and perverts, but it destroys my mom. Never forget the purpose of the communities you visit to you. That celebrity site is just a passing curiosity. But this is a site with an active community that seeks out corpses to wank to. They are highly up at best and are likely extremely dangerous considering some of these threats I've gotten. Hi, some bit the research about school shootings around the world from Columbine to the most recent one in Mexico at the time. It was terrifying to read the survivors' testimonies. I just imagine what would I do if that happened in my school, and ended up crying thinking about my little brother's fate in those circumstances. Also, the statistical analysis and studies about the topic are unnerving since they seem to be more frequent globally every year. And I hated getting to know about those groups that praise shooters. I would prefer if I didn't know those exist. It's frustrating. Historia de los Aztecas y Mayas specifically about all the human sacrifice they did. I think the Aztecs sacrificed at least one person a day, and there was one event that historians archaeologists speculated some number in the thousands. Super interesting, but must have been nuts to come across that as an outsider. A sci-fi timeline PDF I found a while back, I think it was on the World Building sub. It was a timeline of humanity that started it off relatively normal, detailing human evolution as they colonized Mars and the stars beyond. It descended into body horror when they came into contact with an advanced race that for some reason I forget gene-modded the majority of humans into non-sentient species and seeded them across the galaxy. It then went into great detail with each of these species separately and their climb back to sentience. It ended with one of the new humans that evolved back to sentience standing beside original human skull. I haven't been able to find it since, but got dark. Edit. I found it again. It's all tomorrow's a billion-year chronicle of the myriad species and varying fortunes of man. Link here if anyone wants it. Temple OS is a trip worth the read. The guy behind it was pretty genuinely insane, literally. And figuratively, he used his homebrew operating system to talk to God, and believed he was married to a YouTuber that didn't talk to him. Truly a sad story. He often called himself the greatest programmer who ever lived, and he's right. He coded an entire OS by himself. He was a genuinely nice guy when he wasn't out. Craziness, struggled with schizophrenia, was stuck by a train and died, but investigators couldn't decide whether it was suicide or not. There's this guy on Facebook, I wish I could remember his name, but he married his doll and has photos together of them everywhere. At first, I thought it was a troll account, but the more I looked, the creepier. It got the dates on the photos dated back years, and he showed off his doll's wardrobe and all the possessions he had of hers, and then there were multiple friend accounts of different sex dolls on his page that's completely public, but genuinely the weirdest part to me was that he lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Like, imagine if someone accidentally ended up there. Edit. I spent an hour last night looking for it, and surprisingly, it's apparently more common than I thought. WTF is wrong with people. Anyways, I'll look some more today because it was a viral share. Lee about the Japanese concentration camps being especially horrible on Reddit, and that was extremely depressing and up. But I couldn't bring myself to stop reading. Yeah, I fell down the Unit 731, one rabbit hole for a while back in 2018. I think I felt weird for a full week afterwards. One thing that stuck with me was reading an interview with a surviving scientist, who when asked if he felt guilty, he responded, "No, we did nothing wrong. This was war, and in war, you have to win. This was war, and in war, you have to win." A relative of mine is a social worker who deals with older people. She helped arranging care for a man with Alzheimer's. A few years ago, unfortunately, a lot of people with this disease regress into very old memories. This man had been a prisoner of war of the Japanese, being subject to torture and all sorts. He was in a constant state of terror because his memory had regressed to the point where he thought he was back there, and there was nothing anyone could do about it for him. Absolutely awful. Reading about John Jones, the spelunker who got stuck upside down in a narrow crevice at Nutty Putty Cave in 2009, scared the hell out of me. Rescuers got to his feet, talked to him for hours, but just couldn't get him out. Ultimately, the cave was sealed with his body inside. I was a lurker in a car forum for many years. This was probably 8 or so years ago. One time, someone posted a thread that linked to an insurance auto website that resold accident cars to reclaim money. There was a whole category of cars labeled biohazard, and these are the cars that end up with body fluids in them. Giant shits from being in an accident drive, by shootings with blood everywhere, even suicide cars with brains blasted on the roof. These auto auctions don't want to clean that mess up so they will sell the cars, cheap. Some people in the forum even found news articles that corresponded with the murder accident etc. in a particular car. It was incredibly creepy, but I admittedly spent hours and hours, sometimes looking through these disgusting tragic cars. Serial killers never could understand what could drive someone into such depravity. People sometimes mistake my curiosity for them as a fandom. I despise them. They just pique my curiosity, something about trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. That makes it so interesting. I once found the manuscript for the Toy Box Killer online and it blew me up for a few weeks. The Murder of Junko Furuta, just read it. Those kids are literal demons. Even most cartel tortures don't last that long. Poor girl literally suffered for absolutely nothing. It sickens me every time she's brought up that her killer rejoined society. All but one have been arrested again for violent crimes. I watched a video about her when I was around 9 years old. The video talked about it in full detail. I saw it while going through my feed, then saw the video saying, "This is not for the faint of heart." And I thought, I'm brave enough, I can do this. I finished the video. Into this day, that was the most disturbing thing I ever knew about. Even the mention of it just makes me uncomfortable. The group stalking sites and subreddit, just to be clear, I don't think it's real, but holy, it's just so crazy thinking about how all these people are dead-ass convinced that there are massive conspiracies against them. I didn't leave the link on purpose because after spending any significant amount of time on there, you sort of start to think it could be real. The Holodomor, it's constantly denied, not taught in American schools at all, and an example of how terrible humans can be to each other, the government, to the people, and how far people will go to survive after a whole bunch of digging. I found a book of translated testimonies of survivors. I wouldn't know about it at all if it weren't for a comment on Reddit 2 years ago. That caused me to Google, and down the rabbit hole I went. Could I get a summary? A mass starvation event in the early 30s in Soviet Ukraine. At least 3 million died of starvation. The cause is still academically debated, either mismanagement or a deliberate act by Stalin to suppress Ukrainian political opposition. It's also known as the terror famine. The word means to kill by starvation. The accounts of the survivors are harrowing. A woman doctor wrote to a friend in June 1933 that she had not yet become a cannibal, but was not sure that I shall not be one by the time my letter reaches you. The good people died first. Those who refused to steal or to prostitute themselves died. Those who gave food to others died. Those who refused to eat corpses died. Those who refused to kill their fellow man died. Parents who resisted cannibalism died before their children did. Jonestown Massacre, a cult lead town that all were coerced into suicide. There's an audio recording on YouTube of the whole town committing mass suicide. Albert Fish, a cannibal serial killer that wrote a letter to the parents of one of the little girls he ate. Edit. I thought of 3 others because I'm weird, I guess, and I know a lot of up things. Number 1, the murder of Sylvia Likens. It's a really up story about a girl who was being horrifically abused for months. Number 2, thalidomide was an over-the-counter drug sold mostly in Germany, marketed as being safe for pregnant women, mostly being to help with dizziness and morning sickness among a few other things. However, mothers who used thalidomide most certainly gave birth to babies with birth defects, primarily with shortened or missing limbs. Some of the thalidomide babies ended up just fine and very successful, but this was the 60s, so many were terribly mistreated. The company still hasn't done anything to make up for it. I have fallen down too. Both lasted about a week. First was John Jane Does, who have never been claimed or identified. Second was people who have disappeared without a trace. I feel this one tugged more on my emotional strings, especially stories involving kids. One that has stuck with me as a little boy who disappeared on a scout hike, Jared Negri. That is one of my greatest fears when I take kids hiking. I wanted to learn more about gender dysphoria to better understand trans people and such. I learned about this set of twins, Bruce and Brian Reimer, born in the 60s. They were boys, but Bruce had a botched circumcision, so he had gender reassignment surgery and was raised as a girl named Brenda. The twins were sent to a doctor named John Money, who wanted to prove that gender identity is learned. He made the twins as children roleplay in certain positions to reinforce the gender reassignment. Brian developed schizophrenia in his teenage years, and Brenda never learned to live as a girl, despite constant reinforcement and hormone therapy. At 14, he was told of his surgery at birth, rejected his forced female identity, and took on the name David. David Reimer committed suicide in 2004. This will sound mild compared to the stories of actual torture and war crimes, but I heard the whole story about a Reddit user named Jason in hell. For those who don't know, it was the real story of a man who posted in relationships about his wife cheating on him with a neighbor. Jason finally decides he's going to leave his wife and take the kids with him, but then the wife actually murdered the children while he was away at work. Jason made a follow-up post about dealing with the pain and grief of what happened, but he seems to be doing his best despite everything that happened. Edit. Thank you for all the awards, guys. I didn't expect this to blow up at all. For those who mentioned the channel, yes, I do remember this from Nexpo. I'm a long-time subscriber. Cave diving accidents, they're always tragic and sad and insanely common in the community due to the dangers of cave diving, but they have been to some of the most untouched areas of Earth, and I kind of get the need to keep exploring even if it's dangerous. I read about a pair of guys who realized their line had snapped, and they were trapped in an air pocket with only enough oxygen for one of them to try and escape for help. Dude had to wait in the pitch black for hours, not knowing if his friend had reached help or died along the way. Scares the crap out of me. I can barely bring myself to swim under small stuff in safe swimming pools. I've never tried diving, and I really don't think I could conquer that fear. While looking at bird videos, I came across a compilation of Russians on how to create birth homunculi using eggs and sperm. Watch at your own risk. I'm pretty sure all of the creatures seen in the videos are fake, but I couldn't help watch the entire series. Something about those videos still haunts me to this day, seeing those creatures move and even blink. Deaths on Mount Everest and how a lot of the bodies are still up there. This was a wiki rabbit hole I fell into after listening to the Case File episode on David Sharp Red, not only about him but also Green Boots, this couple that got separated, etc. Due to the extremely cold temperatures, the bodies aren't that decomposed, so they still look recent, even though it's been years or decades. It's creepy and sad. Some bodies have been there so long, they are used as markers for climbers. What is also sad is that there have been efforts to remove them, but doing so is extremely dangerous because of the altitude, temperatures, and uneven ground. People have died attempting it in the past. Not sure if they've managed to succeed since I last read about it in 2018. Edit. I'm not sure the podcast was Case File since I listened to the episode I mentioned years ago. It could have been another true crime podcast. Also, thanks for my first Reddit award. Damn, I wish I remember his name years ago. I watched a video on YouTube of Elvis' last phone call, which was recorded in the comments. There was this guy who had claimed to know Elvis personally, and who went on about how he was in his final days. I grew very suspicious. I clicked his YouTube channel and found more comments on other dead celebrity videos of him claiming to be a family friend. I searched this guy's name and found his weird-ass website. It was the most bizarre I've ever seen. It was full of long posts about how this guy was a lead designer and architect in some important buildings worldwide. It also chronicled all of his celebrity friends. Guy was definitely schizophrenic. I assume finding his website was just so odd. It's like looking into a portal into his mind. Since then, I've become very interested in schizophrenia, and I've happened to stumble upon others who seem to have it. There's also this guy in LinkedIn who is a writer. He goes on these rambles on his LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter about a girl who was killed, but his sentences are all circular, if that makes sense. Almost like talking with someone with dementia who keep repeating the same thing over and over, except this guy has been doing the same thing for years, just lost in a possible fairy tale. The mind is, oh. It was months ago in the Ask Reddit thread. What is something you regret knowing, or something a user called out another user as a person we all know exists among us but have never met? The comment was removed by a moderator, so I can't tell you either user involved, but let me sum it up for you. The user being called out is clearly a psychopath. Her entire post history is that she has a desire to vivisect and torture another person to death. She admits she has this desire, and it is a pretty obsessive desire based on their framing, and believe wholeheartedly that everyone has these desires, and that she was normal. She adamantly argues that the only reason people deny having those feelings is because of the social taboo of it, and that everyone around them is lying to save face, that she's the only person with the gall to admit it. She claims she will never act on it because the fear of getting caught is too great, but that seems to be her only inhibition. She has multiple buried dead in the water threads, and this subreddit asking questions like, why are people afraid to talk about this shared feeling? What is your murder fantasy? How would you dissect a living person if you knew you could get away with it? She also claims to be asexual, clearly that otherwise sexual desire is redirected toward this. Based on the enthusiasm she has in talking about it, she claims that the only people she has shared these feelings with in her real life are her mother and her husband. The most unsettling thing is the last I checked, she was trying with her husband to get pregnant. It's been on my mind a lot as of late in that it is a prime example of a mentally unwell person saying, I'm like this and I'm normal, therefore everyone is like this because normal people are like this, and this concept had been coming up a lot in my personal life as of late.